Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, with regard to the DDX, which we were talking about, DDGX, I hope that you will work in consultation with the major yards to try to get as far into the design process as possible. Where we've gotten in trouble, as this committee has observed with the Ford, for example, is doing R&D while we're building. And to the extent the requirements and design can be finalized, then the yards can do a lot better job in terms of on-time construction and on-budget construction. And it seems to me that would start with consultations on what the Navy is thinking about for capabilities and what the yards can produce. And I'm not talking about negotiations, I'm really talking about discussions on those issues.
Yes, sir. So the CNO identified the top level, we'll call the top level requirements, the very high level requirements in December of this past year. And after that, we said, okay, now we need to bring industry in and have those discussions before we get into the actual design of the ship. And so over the last couple of months, we have brought both Bath and Ingalls shipyards in, as well as the electrical control system kind of companies in, to start having those conversations this year before we start in 22 to actually start the preliminary design of the ship. So while we may have been a little slower than industry might have wanted us, we wanted to get those, at least the top level ideas in place. Now bring industry in and start having those discussions before we start designing the ship, sir.
And getting the design close to final and the requirements close to final before the contracting process allows the bidders to give you a better bid because they don't have to have so much uncertainty built into their.
As we're going through the design process over the next few years, we want them to be together as teammates, right? And both shipyards will know all the details before we put out the request for a proposal to actually build the ship, right? So they're teammates, and then of course they'll compete to actually build the ship. But our idea is we're all together as one team for the next few years as we design this new ship.
Secretary, if I could ask, sir, I participated in a meeting also with HII and Ingalls about a month ago, where we brought them in a classified setting and laid out the case. Here's the adversary, here's where they're going, here's the pace that they're going at it. Here's the things that Flight 3 brings us. Here's the things we want to transfer to Flight 3 to that new hull. Here's the logic behind the case I laid out to you on why we need to transition to a ship that's got more service life allowance for the future. And it was a great interchange of discussion. So I think we're on the path to do that, but I think we must continue that. And we've seen great success with things like the frigate program, where we had this ability to go back and forth with industry at a much more rapid rate than we have in the past to inform that design. I think DDGX will be a little different than the frigate because it will require a new hull form, and I think a new power generation system, an integrated power system, to provide that reserve in the future. And that's where we'll have to be really lockstep as we work together.
Well, if you're looking for an advanced ship with an enormous power capability, I would commend to you the Zumwalt. That has a.
It's a lot of ships, sir. Yes.
A huge potential there. Okay, General and Admiral, in the past years, we've had a problem with losing aviators and a shortage of fighter pilots, particularly. And I just wanted to inquire, I'll start with you, General, how you're doing on retention of pilots, recruitment. Did COVID hurt, help? Where do you stand with regard to pilots?
Sir, candidly, not where we should be. Lieutenant General Mark Wise.
Is your mic on?
It is, sir. Let me get a little closer. Sorry, sir. Lieutenant General Mark Wise, who's our Deputy Commandant for Aviation, I speak about this often with the Commandant. We are short on TAC air pilots, on jet pilots. I wouldn't say COVID had a significant impact, sir, but what has had an impact is it takes a while to get through flight school, obviously. We call it the pool. When you go in weather conditions or any kind of a fuel issue, or if you have a training aircraft that is down, there's an OBOGS, onboard oxygen system. If that is down, we work through that. That can delay, and that'll cause a pool or a backup in production of pilots. We also obviously are competing with, as always, with the airlines who have a relatively inexhaustible, we would argue, an inexhaustible budget to pay bonuses. That is a challenge for us, sir. And in all candor, we get a little bit of feast or famine, sir. Young Marines sign up because, they want to get out and they want to fly. They want to get hours. And they either don't get enough, or if they're deployed, they're quite busy.
It's interesting you should say that, because several years ago, Senator Cotton and I had a sort of informal focus group with a group of military pilots about this issue. And we were trying to inquire, what are the problems? And we expected money and bonuses and lifestyle. The most significant thing they told us was, we want to fly. We want hours in the air. That's why we went into this field. We don't want to be behind a desk. And it was interesting. Some of them said, look, I don't want to be a general. I want to be a pilot. So don't put me in this track where I have to have so many hours at the Pentagon or wherever. And I thought that was a very interesting observation.
Sir, you're about being a general, wholly concur. They don't. But the point, what you will see, sir, is a shift over time. The young pilots, they'll head out and they just want to rack up hours. They just want to fly. I just hosted at the barracks for a parade, Lieutenant Colonel Nicole Mann, one of our astronauts, and she's got a couple hundred carrier landings. She's now one of our astronauts. But that will change over time, in that if they really want to do that at some point, but when you get a little older, you have a family, to Senator Rono's point, and you may not wish to deploy quite as much, you'll get the reverse, hence the feast or famine. Maybe I don't want to be deployed this much because my kids are in school. So we're trying to deal with all of them simultaneously, sir. And I'll defer to Jim. I know we're over, but it's a
Admiral, how are you
challenge.
doing on pilot?
We have the same challenges General Smith laid out. I just wanted to bring out one other aspect to this. The way the threat is advancing, we've got to increase our investment in live virtual constructive environments. And that allows us to replicate the threat at the numbers that we would be challenging the fly adversary aircraft at. So that will, again, stimulate and train our pilots and our air crews better to be more proficient. Doesn't replace time in the cockpit in the air, but it supplements it in a way that they're better prepared. And we train and generate those forces in a realistic manner so they're prepared to go to the fight.
I'm way over time, but just a final point. I hope whatever platforms you're working on, Marines, Navy, cyber is a major consideration. There's no question in my mind that if there is a conflict, and we certainly hope there isn't one, it will start with a massive cyber attack and trying to blind us and disable our, particularly command and control. So I assume, Mr. Secretary, that's a high priority in terms of the requirements and design requirements for anything we're buying.
Yes, Senator King, cyber and space are two, frankly, warfare areas or domains that everything has to work in as well as the normal undersea, sea, and air.
May I just have one other point? I hope when you're acquiring these new platforms, whether it's an airplane or a ship, you're buying the intellectual property as well as the hardware so that in the future we can make our own parts. I foresee the day where every Navy ship has a 3D printer on board, so that it's, for one of the shoe, the horse was lost for one of the horse. And if you can print your own parts instead of waiting for a manufacturer to
Yes, sir. That's my legal team is their number one thing they're working on right now. And we're happy to work with your staff on if any language or something like that might help us out there, sir.